morning Belle Thornwick decided my family's century-old lake belonged to her pampered little prince was the morning she picked a fight with the wrong man. I've dealt with droughts, blizzards, wildfires, and the kind of cattle losses that'll bring a grown man to his knees, but nothing burns hotter than entitlement dressed up in designer clothes. It started at 6 a.m. Dawn hadn't even settled. I'd stepped onto the porch with steaming coffee, watching the first light spread across the ridges when the mountain silence ripped apart. 3 police cruisers came screaming up my drive, red and blue lights flashing like a carnival. Gravel exploded under their tires, rocks spitting in all directions, the sound sharp as machine gun fire. The smell of diesel exhaust rolled in with the cold air, mixing with the bitter edge of my coffee. And there she was, Belle, president of the Whispering Pines HOA, sitting pretty in her spotless Range Rover at the end of the drive, filming the whole circus on her phone. Her posture was perfect, her grin even better. She was practically salivating, ready to plaster my name across every neighborhood forum she could find. The officers fanned out like they were about to raid a meth lab, hands hovering close to belts, boots crunching across my gravel. And me, I just stood there on the porch, mug in hand, watching like it was some kind of bad play. "What seems to be the problem, gentlemen?" I asked. Their sergeant shifted uncomfortably before speaking. "Sir, we've had a complaint of trespassing. Claim is that you're illegally blocking community access to the lake." I nearly laughed, nearly spilled coffee right there on the boards. Community access? That lake's been Holloway land since 1887. My great-grandfather carved our home out of this ground with his bare hands. But of course Belle had her script ready. She leaned out her SUV window, voice as syrupy as it was smug. "Officers, my son has been trying to use his rightful recreational rights. Mr. Holloway threatened him and barred access." Her son, Tucker, a 22-year-old Instagram wannabe with the work ethic of a dead mule. For months he'd been sneaking onto my land, dragging his buddies down to the water to film whatever nonsense he thought passed for content. Diesel trucks rumbling in at dawn, drones buzzing overhead, beer bottles glittering in the cattails like landmines. Then came the kicker. Tucker wasn't just playing around. He was charging strangers $200 a head for exclusive access to my private lake. The same lake where we'd scattered Grandma Eleanor's ashes 3 years back. The same water where 4 generations of Holloways had fished, swum, and prayed. And now his mama, Belle, had the audacity to call me a trespasser. The officers shifted awkwardly, waiting for me to respond. I kept my voice steady, calm. "Officers, you're standing on land my family's held clear title to for over a century. This lake is not, and never has been, public." That's when Belle struck her big move. She stepped out of her SUV, heels sinking in my gravel like they didn't belong here, and they didn't. In her manicured hand was a manila folder stuffed with papers. She marched right up to my porch, smiled that patronizing smile only city women perfect, and spread the sheets out on my railing. "I've done some research, Garrett," she purred like we were old friends. "According to these documents, the original homestead allowed recreational water use for the township. You're illegally restricting community rights." I glanced down at her so-called official papers. County clerk stamps, signatures, photocopies. To anyone else, they might have looked real. But I've read enough legal documents in my lifetime. Property deeds, grazing leases, water rights. Contracts to know a fraud when I see one. Her evidence referenced Whispering Pines Township. Cute. Except that subdivision didn't even exist until 2019. My great-grandfather's homestead predated it by 132 years. I didn't let on, though. My grandfather always told me, when someone brings you forged papers, act polite. Let them believe they fooled you while you gather proof to bury them later. So I nodded slowly, pulled out my phone, and snapped photos of every single page. Belle's confident grin flickered just slightly. "I'll have to review these with my attorney," I said flatly. Her tone sharpened. "Surely that's unnecessary. We're all neighbors here, Garrett. No need to drag lawyers into this." Neighbors. That word felt like poison on her lips. The coffee in my hand had gone cold, steam long gone. Behind me, my cattle settled into evening rhythm, their lowing carrying across the land my ancestors bled to hold. And here was Belle Thornwick, an HOA president with bleach-blonde highlights and a Range Rover that had never seen dirt, trying to steal the most sacred piece of my heritage with nothing but fabricated documents and arrogance. But she'd already made her first critical mistake. Belle thought kindness meant weakness. She thought rural meant ignorant. She thought a Montana rancher wouldn't know how to fight back. She was about to learn the truth. Out here, we don't just know land and cattle, we know law. And when somebody tries to take your legacy with forged papers, you don't just defend yourself, you destroy them completely. My name is Garrett Holloway, and this ranch isn't just land under my boots, it's a living inheritance. Every acre carries the echo of generations before me. Folks in town see barbed wire fences, cattle grazing, maybe the shimmer of a lake at sunset. What I see are ghosts, not the kind that haunt, but the kind that stand beside you, reminding you that every decision you make is their weight. My great-grandfather Augustus Holloway homesteaded this place back in 1887. He rode out of Missouri with nothing more than a mule, a rifle, and the kind of stubborn faith men used to have. He carved out a life in this wild country, building a cabin by the lake, digging wells with his bare hands, and raising a family where winters cut down the weak and only grit carried you through. The lake was our crown jewel, 12 acres of spring-fed water shimmering like a mirror between the pines. Augustus used to say that God left it here as proof that heaven brushed against Montana once. He built our first cabin on its shore, raised cattle on its banks, and swore the Holloways would guard it for as long as blood ran in our veins. And we did. 4 generations since, the Holloways have bled into this dirt. My grandfather Elijah rode out every morning with a Bible in one hand and reins in the other. He fought locusts, drought, and market collapses, and still managed to keep the ranch alive through the Depression. My father, Henry, fought overseas in Vietnam, then came back to fight a different kind of war, keeping developers from swallowing this land whole in the 70s and 80s. Then came me, Garrett Holloway. I grew up with cracked hands and sunburned skin, learning how to mend fence before I could shave. At 10, I was driving tractors. At 15, I was birthing calves in snowstorms at 2 a.m. By the time most kids my age were thinking about prom dates, I was signing feed contracts and managing grazing rotations. I married young, thought I'd build the perfect life out here. Wife, child, a future as steady as the mountains. But life has its way of breaking the neat little pictures you frame in your mind. My marriage ended when the city lights called louder than country skies. She left, couldn't stand the isolation, couldn't stand me, truth be told. But sound. He left me with Skylar, my daughter, my one bright flame in the long Montana nights. She grew up chasing calves, riding horses, and learning the meaning of work most kids her age couldn't even spell. For college, I swore I wouldn't hold her back. The Holloway name didn't. When she left need chains, it needed wings. Still, the lake remained the heart of everything. 3 years back, we gathered there to scatter Grandma Eleanor's ashes. The old woman had spent every summer shelling peas on the porch while grandkids swam in the shallows. That day, the water caught the last gold of sunset, carrying her ashes into ripples that seemed to glow from within. I remember thinking she wasn't gone, just folded into the land she loved. Every dawn since, when the fog drifts across that water, I hear her voice in the whisper of the reeds. That lake isn't just water and dirt. It's memory. It's sacred. And that's what made Belle Thornwick's intrusion more than just trespass. She wasn't just trying to steal water. She was trying to erase history. City folks like her don't understand legacy. They think land is a commodity, something you can buy, sell, or bully your way into. To them, a lake is just a backdrop for social media, a place to snap pictures of overpriced fishing gear. To me, that lake holds the laughter of my grandmother, the sweat of my grandfather, the tears of my father, and the prayers of my mother. To me, it's a graveyard and a church, all in one. I was 45 when Belle showed up. Divorced. Weathered. A man who carried both the pride and the loneliness of his years. But one thing I wasn't was weak, and Belle had mistaken silence for surrender. She didn't realize that my family had been fighting battles like hers for generations. Developers had tried, speculators had tried, even the government once tried, but the Holloways never bent, and I sure as hell wasn't about to start now. The saddle creaks in the morning, the smell of sweet clover in spring, the way frost etches lace on the barn windows in January. These things are stitched into my soul. This is the kind of life that doesn't make sense to outsiders because it doesn't need to. It's not about convenience or comfort. It's about belonging. So When Belle rolled up with her forged documents and her fake smile, she wasn't just trespassing, she was spitting on the graves of my ancestors, and I promised myself right then I'd fight her with everything I had, with the law, with the land, with the kind of patience city people don't understand. She might have had lawyers and officers willing to take her calls, but I had something stronger. History. And history doesn't bend for anyone. The first time I laid eyes on Belle Thornwick was the same week the survey stakes went up. Bright pink ribbons fluttered across my southern pasture like plastic vultures, marking out what would become the Whispering Pines subdivision. Developers had been circling our valley for years, sniffing around like coyotes, but I never thought they'd get this close. Then one morning, I rode out along the fence line and saw bulldozers biting into the earth across from my land. Pine trees came down like matchsticks, soil ripped open, the smell of diesel replacing the mountain air. That was the day the quiet ended. Whispering Pines. That's what they called it. A name soft enough to sell to folks moving from California or Denver. Rows of identical houses, everyone painted in some shade of beige, sprouted like weeds. Driveways poured, streetlights erected, roads named after birds that hadn't lived here in decades. Blue Jay Lane, Meadowlark Court, Osprey Circle, a whole artificial world stitched over the skin of real Montana. At first I stayed out of it. I'd seen this kind of thing before. Developers come, sell off lots, folks play at being country until the first real winter hits. Then they pack up, move back to the city, and leave behind empty houses and cracked driveways. But Whispering Pines was different. The PE, Opal who moved in, weren't the type to bend to the land. They wanted the land to bend to them. And their queen bee was Belle Thornwick. I still remember that first meeting. I was mending fence near the southern line when a gleaming Range Rover pulled up on the subdivision side of the wire. Out stepped Belle, tall, polished, dressed in a tailored jacket that probably cost more than one of my heifers. Her blonde hair was pulled into a perfect twist, nails manicured sharp enough to gut a trout. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that warms you. It was the kind that hides venom behind lip gloss. "Mr. Holloway?" She called across the fence, her voice carrying like a radio announcer. I tipped my hat but didn't move closer. "That's me." "I'm Belle Thornwick," she said, as though the name should mean something. "President of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I wanted to introduce myself and welcome you to the neighborhood." I couldn't help but laugh. "Ma'am, I've been here since 1978. You're the ones new to the neighborhood." That smile of hers didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened, calculating, like a rattlesnake sizing up the distance to strike. "Of course," she said sweetly. "Still, I believe it's important to maintain good relations between adjoining properties. After all, our residents value peace and privacy. I'm sure you do too." I just nodded. "That's why I keep my fences tight." Her gaze flicked toward the lake in the distance, shimmering behind my tree line. "A lovely body of water you have there. The residents have been asking about access. You see, it's terribly inconvenient for families to have such a beautiful lake nearby and not be able to enjoy it." That was the moment I knew she wasn't just another suburban transplant. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was probing, looking for cracks, testing my defenses. "That lake's private," I said flatly. "Always has been. Always will be." Her smile widened, but I saw the fangs now. "Oh, surely there's room for compromise. After all, progress is inevitable, Mr. Holloway. Times change. Communities evolve. It would be such a shame for there to be unpleasantness between neighbors." I looked her square in the eye. "Unpleasantness only comes when folks forget where the lines are." She held my gaze for a long moment, then slipped back into her Range Rover without another word. But I knew right then what I was dealing with. Belle Thornwick wasn't some bored housewife looking for a hobby. She was a rattlesnake in designer heels, venomous, patient, and ready to strike when the timing was right. Over the next year, Whispering Pines grew like a tumor, street after street filled with people who had no respect for the land. They planted lawns where sagebrush once grew, sprayed pesticides that drifted across my pastures, and let their yapping dogs chase my cattle. At night, porch lights glared across the valley like a prison yard, drowning out the stars. And Belle was at the center of it all. HOA meetings in the clubhouse, glossy newsletters, rules about what color curtains were acceptable. She wasn't just running the subdivision, she was shaping it into her personal kingdom. Every so often I'd catch her or her son lingering near the fence line, eyes on my lake. They looked at it the way a thief looks at an unlocked door. And I knew it was only a matter of time before she made her move. I've lived long enough to know that some battles you can avoid, but others are written before you're born. My great-grandfather fought drought. My grandfather fought poverty. My father fought developers. Me? I was destined to fight Belle Thornwick, and like every Holloway before me, I wasn't planning to lose. If Belle was venom, then her boy Tucker was rot. The kind that starts small like mold in the corner of a barn but spreads until the whole structure stinks. He was 19 when I first noticed him skulking around my fence line. A trust fund brat with gelled hair, designer sunglasses, and a grin that looked borrowed from some reality show. Where Belle carried her poison in whispers and contracts, Tucker wore his corruption like a badge. At first it was small things. Beer cans tossed along the ditch road, cigarette butts flicked into dry grass. Then one Saturday, I rode out to check cattle and heard the thump of bass rolling across the valley. Not coyotes, not tractors, music. I crested the rise above the lake and froze. There must have been 50 kids down there. Red Solo cups in their hands, music blasting from portable speakers. Trucks lined the bank, tailgates down, headlights cutting across the water. And in the middle of it all, Tucker, shirtless, drunk, standing on the hood of his Jeep, waving a bottle like some backwoods king. I nearly tore the saddle horn off my horse. That lake isn't just water. It's where my grandmother's ashes rest, where my family has baptized babies, where 4 generations have prayed and mourned. And here was Tucker Thornwick, turning it into his personal frat party. I rode down fast enough to make dust fly. Heads turned, kids scattering like quail under gunfire. Tucker just laughed, tipping back his bottle. "You're trespassing," I barked. He smirked, wobbling on the hood. "Chill out, old man, it's just water. Everybody deserves to enjoy it." "That water isn't yours," I snapped. "It never has been." He hopped down, nearly tripping over his loafers. "You gonna stop us? What are you, the lake sheriff? Newsflash, this is 2023. You don't own nature." My fists clenched on the reins. "That lake has been Holloway land since before your grandparents were born. You so much as set one toe in it again, and I'll have you in cuffs." He snorted, swaggering up close enough I could smell the cheap cologne under the alcohol. "Cuffs, please. My mom runs this subdivision. She's on the county board. You really think anyone cares about some crusty cowboy whining about his little pond?" I leaned down in the saddle, voice low enough only he could hear. "That little pond holds more history than you could fit in your whole mansion. And if you think flashing your mama's name makes you bulletproof, you've never gone up against a Holloway." His grin faltered then, just a flicker, but he covered it quick, throwing his arms wide. "Whatever, man, it's just a party, don't have a stroke over it." The kids dispersed, leaving tire ruts carved into the mud like scars. Beer cans floated near the reeds, cigarette butts smoldered in the grass. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning their filth, cursing every second of it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tucker's smug face, heard his slurred voice dismissing generations of sacrifice with a shrug. And behind it all, I saw Belle's smile, the same venom now running through her son's veins. The parties didn't stop. Next weekend, there were twice as many. Strangers this time. Outsiders. Tucker had charged $200 apiece for exclusive lake access. He had set up tents, fire pits, even a makeshift dock out of shipping pallets. Instagram models posed at the water's edge. Hashtags like #Montana Paradise splashed across their feeds. Paradise. They called it paradise while trampling over sacred ground, while leaving behind trash bags, broken bottles, and used needles. I found tire tracks through the wildflowers my grandmother planted, ashes from their bonfire staining the stones where we'd laid her to rest. That was the night something inside me shifted. I'd dealt with trespassers before, hunters cutting fences, fishermen sneaking down the creek bed, but this was different. This wasn't ignorance. This was entitlement. This was a deliberate theft, not just of land, but of memory. And it was Belle's doing. Tucker was just the weapon. She had raised him to believe the world belonged to him, that money could buy respect, and that rules were for weaker people. He was her legacy, just as I was mine. Two bloodlines, two legacies, colliding on the shores of one lake. I didn't know it yet, but Tucker's arrogance was about to trigger the war Belle had been itching for, and once the first shot was fired, there'd be no turning back. That lake would become a battlefield, and only one family would be Lee, left standing. I've fought blizzards, droughts, and coyotes, but nothing will wear a man down like paperwork, and that was Belle Thornwick's first real weapon. Not fists, not bulldozers, but paper. It started with a letter, county seal, fancy envelope. I opened it at my kitchen table, coffee steaming beside me. Notice of property review. According to recent documentation, the lake adjacent to Holloway Ranch was not properly surveyed in historical filings and might, in fact, be public access water. My heart dropped straight into my boots. I read the letter 3 times, every word burning like acid. Public access. That lake had been Holloway property since 1887. The deed was older than the courthouse itself, but there it was in black and white. Belle Thornwick's first strike. A week later, 2 county officials showed up in shiny trucks, clipboards in hand, city shoes crunching through mud they clearly weren't used to. "Mr. Holloway," one asked, though he already knew damn well who I was. "That's me. We're here to conduct a review of the lake's boundaries. There have been concerns raised." "Concerns," I said flatly. "Or complaints?" They shifted uncomfortably. "We received a petition from the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. They claim historical surveys may have misidentified the water's ownership. Until we verify, the lake will be considered open access." That word, until, hit like a kick to the gut. I kept my voice steady, though my blood was boiling. "You're telling me a subdivision built 2 years ago can undo 140 years of family history with a petition?" The taller one cleared his throat. "It's not that simple. There are discrepancies. Some records from the early 1900s aren't clear. We have to follow protocol. Protocol, always protocol." I rode with them down to the lake, my horse towering over their polished boots. They paced the shore, measuring tapes stretched, GPS gadgets blinking. I didn't need gadgets. I had my grandfather's words, my father's memories, my own 2 eyes that had seen this land since I was old enough to walk. This lake, I told them, was dug deeper by my great-grandfather in 1902 when drought threatened the herd. He built the spillway with his own hands. Every Holloway since has maintained it. You think some HOA newsletter erases that? They avoided my gaze. One muttered something about temporary designation and further review. When they left, tire tracks scarred the grass, and I knew I wasn't fighting just Belle anymore. I was fighting the machine she had greased, the county board, the survey office, maybe even the courts. That night I dug through the old trunk in my barn loft. Dust choked me as I pulled out deeds, maps, brittle papers written in ink so faded you had to tilt it to the light. There it was, the original survey of 1887 stamped and notarized. My great-grandfather's signature, firm as the land he'd claimed. I laid it on the table like a weapon. Belle had her lawyers. I had my bloodline. But Belle wasn't done. A month later, I drove into town for feed. When I walked past the courthouse bulletin board, my stomach knotted. A notice was posted. Public hearing. Proposed lake access easement date. Time. Location. And beneath it, Belle's name. She'd moved fast. Faster than I'd expected. She wasn't asking. She was telling. And she was dragging the whole damn town into it. At the hearing, the room was packed. Whispering Pines residents filled the benches, nodding along as Belle spoke with her honeyed venom. "This lake is a natural resource," she cooed. "It is unfair, even selfish for one man to hoard it while hundreds of families live mere feet away. Our children deserve to swim. Our families deserve to picnic. Our community deserves access." Applause. Murmurs of agreement. Phones out, recording her polished performance. When my turn came, I stood alone. My boots clumped against the tile, hat in my hand. I looked at those people, strangers to this valley, weekend ranchers who thought barbed wire was rustic decor, and I felt the weight of every Holloway behind me. This lake, I said, voice steady, isn't a swimming pool. It's not a playground. It's my family's legacy. My great-grandfather dug it. My grandfather bled for it. My father fought for it. And if you think I'll stand by while a pack of newcomers with manicured lawns steal it, think again. Silence. A few claps. Mostly glares. The county clerk cleared his throat. We'll review the documentation further. Decision pending. Decision pending. Always pending. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the dark silhouette of the lake. The moon rippled across the water, calm and ancient, as if mocking the petty squabbles of men. I realized then this wasn't just about Belle or Tucker. It wasn't even about the lake. It was about the soul of the land itself, whether it belonged to the ones who had nurtured it or the ones who saw it as scenery. Belle had fired her first real shot, and I was done playing defense. There's a saying out here, a fence only works if folks respect it. Problem is, people like Belle and Tucker never respected anything they didn't own, and when respect dies, the only thing left is confrontation. The week after the hearing, I rode down to the lake at dawn like I always do. Fog still clung to the water, the kind of mist that makes the world feel holy. But as I drew closer, the air soured. Trash floated against the reeds, plastic wrappers tangled in the cattails, and near the rocks where my grandmother's ashes rested, a pile of broken beer bottles glittered like teeth. That was it. I saddled up my sorrel gelding, loaded my .30-30 in its scabbard, and rode the fence line. By noon I found them, 2 trucks backed up against the shore, kids hauling coolers and cases of beer out like it was their private resort. I rode straight in, didn't slow, didn't smile, the horses' hooves through mud high enough to splash their designer sneakers. You're trespassing, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. One of them, a lanky kid in a flat-brimmed cap, laughed nervously. Come on, man, it's just water. Chill out. I unhooked the rifle from its scabbard. Didn't point it, just let it rest across my saddle horn, metal catching the light. This isn't water, Pig said. This is Holloway land, and you're done. The laughter died quick. They packed up, muttering curses under their breath, but they left, and that was the first time I realized something. Belle's power came from the law, from papers and petitions. But these kids, these parasites her boy Tucker lured in, they only understood fear. 2 nights later, Tucker himself showed up. I heard the music before I saw the lights, thumping bass rattling through the timber like a sickness. By the time I reached the ridge, the lake shore looked like a carnival, tents pitched, fires blazing, ATVs tearing ruts through the grass, 50, maybe 60 people, and right in the middle, Tucker Thornwick, shirt off, bottle in hand, screaming into a megaphone like he was king of the world. I didn't wait. I rode straight down into the chaos. Folks scattered, some tripping over coolers, others scrambling into their trucks. Party's over, I roared. Tucker, drunk and red-faced, staggered toward me. You again? What is this? Your bedtime patrol? Go back to your barn, old man. This ain't your land anymore, it's ours. Huh? I swung down from the saddle, boots crunching into the mud. You think because your mama forges papers this lake belongs to you? You're a trespasser, same as the rest, he sneered. You can't stop us. My mom's already making it legal. Soon this lake's gonna be Whispering Pine's private playground. You're just delaying the inevitable. I stepped closer, close enough he had to tilt his head back to look me in the eye. Let me tell you something, boy. You can buy lawmen, you can buy paper, but you can't buy fear. And if you keep testing me, you'll learn real quick what a Holloway does when cornered. For the first time I saw it. Hesitation, just a flicker in his drunken eyes. He covered it with a laugh, shouting to his friends, Y'all hear that? Farmer John thinks he's Wyatt Earp. But the party broke up faster than he wanted. They peeled out one by one, leaving tire scars across the meadow. Only Tucker lingered, glaring at me through the smoke of the dying fire. You're gonna regret this, he slurred. You don't know who you're messing with. I leaned on my saddle horn. I know exactly who I'm messing with. A spoiled brat who thinks his mother's money makes him a man. He cursed, climbed into his jeep, and roared off into the night. When the silence returned, I walked to the water's edge. Moonlight rippled across the lake, silver and calm, as if it hadn't just been violated by neon lights and pounding bass. I crouched, letting the cool water run over my fingers, and swore to my ancestors I wouldn't let this stand. Belle wanted to play politics. Tucker wanted to play king. Fine, but I'd drawn the line tonight. From now on, anyone who crossed that fence wasn't just a trespasser. They were an enemy. In ranch country, a man's name is worth more than his herd. A good name buys you credit at the feed store, respect at the stockyards, and a seat at the table when nage. H-bores gather to hash out water rights. A bad name, that'll ruin you faster than drought. Belle Thornwick knew it, and that's why she didn't come at me with bulldozers this time. She came for my reputation. It started 3 days after I broke up Tucker's circus. I was fixing fence when I saw the dust trail on the county road. 2 SUVs, black and gleaming, not trucks, not ranch rigs. Law enforcement. The sheriff himself stepped out, hat low, hand resting on his holster. He'd been elected 2 years ago, city boy from Helena, who thought wearing boots made him a cowboy. He wasn't bad at heart, but Belle had money, and money talks louder than truth. "Mr. Holloway," he said, voice all official, "we need to talk." I wiped the sweat off my brow. "Talk then." He shifted, glancing at the deputies. "We received reports you brandished a firearm at several young people near the lake. Witnesses claim you threatened them. That true?" My gut twisted, but I kept my voice even. "I had a rifle. On my saddle. Never pointed it. Never fired it. I told them they were trespassing." The sheriff's jaw worked. "Still standing there with a rifle in your hands?" They saw it as intimidation. "You understand that could be considered assault with a deadly weapon?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Assault? Those kids were trashing my land, my family's lake, and now I'm the criminal?" He didn't answer, just handed me a paper. Notice of investigation. Belle's words were all over it, though her name wasn't. "The community has concerns," he said. "We'll be keeping an eye on you." The community, meaning Belle's subdivision army, whispering in church pews and county meetings. That weekend, the whispers turned into headlines. The local paper ran a story. Rancher threatens teenagers at lake. No mention of the trespassing, no mention of Tucker's ragers, just a one-sided tale of a bitter old cowboy waving a rifle at innocent kids. I walked into the feed store Monday and felt it. Eyes on me, like barbed wire against the skin. Old friends gave polite nods but didn't linger. Strangers muttered behind bags of dog food. Belle had poisoned the well. At church, the preacher's sermon wasn't about me, not directly, but every word cut close. A man must be slow to anger. He must be careful not to let pride blind him. Violence is not the way of Christ. I sat stiff in the pew, staring at the hymn book, while Belle sat 2 rows up, pearls around her neck, lips curved in a satisfied smile. By the end of the month, the sheriff stopped by twice more, once for a noise complaint when I fired target practice behind the barn, once for unsafe fencing near the county road. Both reports came straight from Whispering Pines. Belle wasn't just painting me as dangerous, she was building a case. I knew what was coming next, restraining order, maybe even charges. If she got the county to declare me a violent threat, she could twist the lake into public access for safety reasons. And once the law branded me a criminal, my word would mean nothing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the old survey maps spread out before me. My grandfather's handwriting danced across yellow paper, steady and sure. Beside them lay the sheriff's notice, crisp and cold, Belle's invisible fingerprints smudged across it. 2 legacies, one built in sweat, the other in manipulation. And in that silence I made a decision. If Belle wanted to fight with papers, I'd fight with steel. Not guns, not violence, but the steel of resolve, the kind that doesn't bend, doesn't break. I started keeping watch at the lake every night, lantern lit, rifle across my knees, dog at my feet. Not to threaten, not to scare, just to guard what was mine. If the sheriff came again, so be it. If the papers piled higher, so be it. Belle Thornwick might smear my name. She might turn the county against me. But she'd never take the one thing I couldn't lose, my place by that water, standing watch for the Holloways who came before me. Because a man can survive without money, he can even survive without friends. But without honor, he's already dead. The war stopped being about paper the night my cattle broke loose. It was just before dawn when I heard the bawling, low, desperate, carrying across the valley like a siren. I threw on my boots, grabbed a lantern, and ran for the pasture. What I saw froze me to the bone. The north fence, 3 strands of barbed wire stretched tight for nearly a mile. wasn't sagging from age or snapped from a storm. It was cut. Clean, deliberate slices through each strand, and through that opening, half my herd had wandered into the timber, confused and scared. One cow lay tangled in the wire, hide torn, eyes rolling white with pain. Another calf bawled for its mother, stuck in the mud where they'd been driven too fast. I knelt beside the injured cow, stroking her neck as she bled into the dirt. The wire hadn't broken by accident. This wasn't the work of coyotes or weather. This was human hands, and I knew whose hands. By mid-morning I had the herd rounded back, lost 2 head, one from the wire, one from panic after running too far into the canyon. A man can lose $100 in a blink, but the sound of a dying cow, one you raised from birth, that tears deeper than any bank account. I fixed the fence with shaking hands, fury hotter than the noon sun burning in my chest. This wasn't mischief anymore. It wasn't trespassing. It was war. 2Ds. This later it escalated. I found tire tracks by the hay barn, fresh ones. The lock on the feed room was busted clean off. Half my winter hay gone. Not taken, not hauled away. Just soaked in diesel fuel, ruined beyond use. The stench clung to everything, a bitter stink that made my stomach turn. And in the dirt outside the barn, scrawled with boot heels, was one word: ours. I didn't need a signature to know it was Tucker's. That night I rode into town, straight to the sheriff's office, slammed the ruined lock down on his desk. "Do your damn job," I growled. "This is sabotage, theft, arson if they'd lit it." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look, Holloway, I get it, but without proof, witnesses, cameras, something, we can't tie this to anyone." "Proof?" I snapped. "You think cattle cut themselves out of fences? You think hay soaks itself in diesel?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "If I start making arrests based on suspicion, half the county'd be in jail. I'll file a report, but unless you've got a picture of Tucker Thornwick with wire cutters in his hand, my hands are tied." Hands tied. Always hands tied. Except mine, which were bleeding from mending fences Bell's boy had torn down. I left without another word, but the fire in me had grown into something darker. That evening, as I sat on the porch, lantern light flickering against the dark, I saw headlights sweep across the far ridge. Not the sheriff, not neighbors, trucks, 3 of them, crawling slow along the fence line, just far enough to stay out of reach, just close enough to remind me they were there. Tucker, his crew, a show of force, a warning. I stood, rifle in hand, dog growling low at my feet. I didn't fire, didn't shout, just watched them from the shadows until they turned and vanished into the night. It was clear now. Bell had the law, the county, the paper. Tucker had the muscle, the kids, the fearlessness of someone who'd never worked a real day in his life. And me? I had one ranch, one herd, one rifle, and a name they were dragging through the mud. But I also had something they didn't. I had patience. A Thornwick fights loud. A Holloway fights quiet. My father used to say that. Noise is for dogs, he'd tell me. A real man moves like a wolf, silent, deadly, certain. So I waited. I rebuilt the fences, replaced the hay, patched up the cattle best I could, and all the while I kept watch. Every creak of the barn door, every howl of the wind, every headlight on the horizon sharpening me like a whetstone, because I knew what Bell and Tucker didn't. Every war has a turning point, and theirs was coming. Soon, blood on the grass wouldn't just be cattle, it would be theirs. I'd lived my whole life with the belief that patience wins wars, but patience without action, that's just surrender dressed in a nice hat. After the fence cutting, the hay sabotage, and those trucks prowling my ridge at night, I knew one thing for certain. Tucker wasn't going to stop until I made him stop. So I decided to take the fight to him. Word in town was that Tucker had built himself a base camp on the north side of the lake, where the forest met the water. Not legal cabins, not even proper tents, just slapped together shacks and tarps, stocked with coolers of booze and crates of fireworks. His buddies treated it like a private fortress. Belle pretended she didn't know about it, but everyone knew she paid for the lumber. I saddled up one night, rifle slung across my back, axe tied to the saddle. Moonlight cut the pines into silver spires, and every cricket seemed to hush as I drew near. When I broke through the trees, there it was. Half a dozen makeshift shelters, beer cans glinting in the dirt, smoke rising from an illegal fire pit. A half-dozen ATVs were lined up, engines still warm. Tucker's kingdom, and not a soul in sight. Luck or providence. I dismounted, tied the horse, and went to work. First, the shacks. My axe swung hard, splintering boards like matchsticks. Roofs caved, tarps shredded, frames toppled into the dirt. Then the ATVs. I pulled the plugs, drained the gas, left them as useless husks. By the time I was done, the camp looked like a tornado had kissed it. But I wasn't careless. I didn't torch it. I didn't leave tracks in the open. Just destruction. Clean, undeniable, untraceable. When Tucker arrived the next afternoon, I was already back at my porch sipping coffee like it was any other day. I heard about the tantrum later from a neighbor, how Tucker screamed himself hoarse, swore vengeance, promised to hunt down whoever had done it, but he didn't say my name. He didn't dare, because even a spoiled boy like Tucker knew nobody could swing an axe like a Holloway. Still, I knew destruction alone wouldn't win. Belle was building her case in the courts, at the county meetings, in the newspapers. Tucker was just her blunt weapon. To win, I had to cut off the head of the snake. That chance came quicker than I thought. At the next county meeting, Belle was there, standing at the podium in her pearl necklace, voice smooth as honey. "It's a matter of safety," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "Mr. Holloway has shown violent tendencies. The sheriff has multiple reports on file. I fear for my family, for our community. The lake should not be controlled by one unstable man. It should be open to all, under proper management." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, some frowned, and Belle smiled like a cat who'd caught the canary. I waited until she finished, then rose slow from my seat in the back, every head turned, some curious, some wary. I walked to the front, boots heavy on the old wooden floor, and faced them all. "You want the truth?" I said. My voice carried, low but steady. "Here it is. My grandfather built those fences. My father bled into that soil. And now folks who never lifted a hand for this land want to take it because they've got money and loud mouths." Belle's smile faltered. I pulled from my coat pocket a bundle of old survey maps, yellowed, fragile, but still clear. I held them high. "This is Holloway land, stamped, signed, recorded before most of you were even born. You want proof? Here it is." Gasps and whispers filled the room. The chairman took the maps, squinting at the dates, nodding. Belle's face turned the color of spoiled milk. "And as for violence," I went on, turning back to the crowd, "ask yourselves, who cut my fences? Who poisoned my hay? Who trampled cattle and left them bleeding? Not me. But I can name the ones who did." I let the silence hang, let their imaginations fill in the rest. Then I stepped down, leaving the maps in plain sight. For the first time, Belle Thornwick looked cornered, her lips pressed tight, her eyes flashing with something not quite fear, not quite rage, but close to both. That night, as I rode home under the stars, I knew I'd shifted the tide. The town wasn't fully on my side yet, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Belle's grip wasn't unbreakable. But war doesn't end with one meeting. It ends with a showdown. And deep down, I knew it was coming. Tucker wasn't going to forgive the camp. Belle wasn't going to forgive the maps. And me? I wasn't going to forgive anything. The night it all came to a head, the air itself felt wrong. Still, heavy, too quiet for summer. Not a cricket, not a coyote, not a whisper of wind. Just silence. I knew before the dogs started growling that they were coming. Headlights carved through the trees on the ridge. Not one truck this time, not two, 4. Engines snarled like wolves closing in on a wounded elk. I stood from the porch, rifle in hand, lantern burning low. My dog bristled at my side, ears flat, teeth bared. The trucks rolled down the dirt road and stopped just short of the pasture. Doors slammed. Out stepped Tucker, swaggering, shotgun slung lazy across his arm. Behind him, his buddies, half drunk, half mean, all trouble. And then Belle, in her cream-colored coat, pearls glinting in the lantern light. She looked out of place, like a vulture at a bullfight, but her eyes burned colder than any of their guns. "Evening, Holloway," she called, voice sharp as broken glass. "Thought you'd like to settle this once and for all." I didn't answer, just leveled my rifle at the dirt, steady hands, steady breath. Tucker stepped forward, grinning like a fool who thought he'd already won. "You wrecked my camp," he said. "You think you can humiliate me? Think you can make me look weak? This is my land now. Time everybody knew it." He cocked the shotgun, the sound loud as thunder in the still night. His boys fanned out, circling like coyotes, but Belle raised a hand, stopping them. "Not yet," she said, her eyes faded. "Set on me. This isn't about camps or cattle. This is about the lake, my lake." I laughed, bitter and low. "Your lake? You didn't earn a drop of it. You didn't put in the sweat, the blood, the years. Holloway water runs Holloway deep, and no lawyer, no sheriff, no spoiled brat with a shotgun is going to change that." Her lips curled. "You're a relic, Daniel. A dying breed. The world belongs to people like me now, people who build, who own, who decide. You're just in the way." I raised the rifle, barrel steady on Tucker's chest. "Then come take it." For a long moment nobody moved, just the lantern flickering, shadows dancing across angry faces, the standoff stretched tight as a pulled wire. Then it snapped. Tucker roared and raised his shotgun. I squeezed the trigger first. The shot cracked the night, echoing off the hills. Tucker's hat flew from his head, pellets from my warning shot spraying the dirt at his boots. He stumbled back, eyes wide, bravado drained in an instant. "Next one goes higher," I said, voice cold as iron. His boys hesitated, eyes darting between me and their would-be leader. None of them wanted to be the first to fall. Belle's face twisted, her mask of calm cracking. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. I stepped forward, rifle never wavering. "Lady, I've buried cattle, I've buried kin, and I'll bury anyone who tries to steal this land. Test me if you think I'm bluffing." The silence that followed was heavier than any gunshot. Tucker swallowed hard, lowering his weapon. One by one, his friends followed. The fight drained out of them, leaving only fear and shame. Belle glared, her power slipping through her fingers like water through a sieve. She opened her mouth, then shut it, realizing for the first time that money and lies couldn't shield her here. Finally she turned, fury sparking in her eyes. "This isn't over," she spat. "You'll regret this. I'll see you in court. I'll see you in the papers. I'll see you ruined." I lowered the rifle, but my gaze stayed locked on hers. "Do what you want. But remember this, Belle, land doesn't belong to whoever screams the loudest. It belongs to whoever's willing to bleed for it, and I've already bled more than you'll ever understand." She flinched at that, just a flicker. Then she spun on her heel, climbed into her SUV, and slammed the door. The trucks fired up, engines rumbling, and one by one they rolled back down the road, their dust swallowed by the known light. When the last tail light vanished, I let out a long breath, shoulders sagging. My dog pressed close, tail wagging once, sensing the storm had passed. I stood there a long while, staring at the still water of Holloway Lake, glinting under the moon. The war wasn't truly over. Belle had courts, lawyers, and newspapers, but she'd lost tonight, the one place money can't buy victory, face to face, on the land itself. And deep down, I knew she'd never set foot on this ranch again, not after seeing what it meant to me. The lake was quiet, the air finally moving again, carrying the scent of pine and earth. I felt my grandfather in that breeze, my father too, felt their pride, their weight, their blood still in the soil beneath my boots. For the first time in months, I wasn't just defending. I had won, and as long as I drew breath, Holloway Lake would remain Holloway land.